Hi, I'm Michael Lang, and I am one of the co-creators of this book, Living Together, Separating, Divorcing, Surviving During a Pandemic. And I have the delight and privilege of talking with one of the contributors to this book, David Gray from Kilkenny. And David's contribution to the book is right here on page 57. So welcome. Welcome, David.
Thank you, Michael, and thanks for having me as part of this project. I've thoroughly enjoyed it, and I think it's a magnificent piece you put together.
Thank you. So, David, for people who are going to view this, provide a little background about who you are and how your background and experience brings you to being a contributor to the book.
Yes, thank you for the introduction. My name is David Gray, and for the last 2 years, I have been CEO of a youth and family service in the southeast of Ireland. Prior to that, I worked in the community in a couple of different settings. I worked in the mental health sector. I worked as a community drugs worker, but also as a functional family therapist. And I think the family therapy piece was what really got me interested into mediation. You'll see from the article that I wrote for this book, this was one of my first ventures in mediation, where a wonderful couple came into me and trusted me enough to talk directly to me about their experiences during a time in Ireland where a lot of people were in a bad situation due to the recession. This particular couple had found themselves unable to communicate. They had found that they had worked really hard, though, to keep things together for the benefit of their children. But they both had a sense that this relationship was at an end for them both. And when they came into the room for me, I just was so struck by their honesty and the powerful positions that they came from. The mom in particular started off by saying, you know, I just need this to end. I just need this to be over. And again, similarly, her partner followed suit, and the outpour of emotion just really stuck with me as a professional, as a practitioner. And what I could see before me was two people who had done their level best to keep things going, and found themselves now in a situation where they were unideally, I suppose, going to be together in the same house for another while yet. How are they going to get through this? How are they going to manage for the sake of their children? And again, what we talked about was really simple but straightforward tips, and some of them are in the article there, around just the ability just to remove yourself from a conflicted situation through distraction and taking your time to process what's going on, and allowing yourself some distance from the other person before you decide on what you want to do. We worked hard on other areas, such as keeping arguments, and it sounds obvious, away from the children. But this was one thing that they strived and worked so hard to achieve. And I think they did a remarkable job in doing that. And they spoke appreciatively of the other person whenever they referred to the children, and how the other person had worked hard to kind of keep the issues separate to two small ears. The last skill that they kind of left me with was their ability, I think, to keep their own emotions in check to some degree, where they found that they in the past had kind of demonized the other side of the argument, and kind of got lost a little bit in terms of finding solutions to what was going on for them. But they showed me, through our conversations, how they could rely on facts and really give the other side, I think, the benefit of the doubt a lot of time. So over the coming few months, and in fact years, working with this couple, I could see that they'd found a united front together. They found a theme that kept them, which was, let's just get through this. Let's get to the other side of this recession and then see what things look like. And they did it. And I think it was a testament to their efforts, and I suppose the ability for all of us to dig deep in times of hardship, such as we're going through right now with the pandemic. And I suppose, despite any problems that might be on the surface, finding the skills, unlocking what we need to find in ourselves to get through that particular moment in time is so, so important. Particularly when we can't reach out to traditional services or, our family or possibly friends as well. So that's really what I wanted to write for the book, was the sense that these skills, these little tips are out there. And for anybody who is in the pandemic situation where they're suffering financially or home life is tough, that there are options there and there are success stories as well that people can look towards.
Because certainly, I mean, that story dates back to the worldwide recession that occurred in 2008, 2009, that period of time, right? And similarly, and actually even in a way more compounded, we not only have financial dislocation for people, but their inability to be able, because of the lockdown, their options for what they might be able to do to separate, to get some space from one another, are severely limited.
Yeah, I would fully agree. And it's that kind of claustrophobic feeling that people might have, particularly when they're in strained situations, that takes its toll. And to protect yourself in that, and to value yourself enough to give yourself every opportunity, I think, to get through this period of time is so important for us all.
Yeah. And David, I'm thinking that so many people might say, well, we just need to declare a truce. But that's not what you're talking about, because a truce just sort of seems to freeze everything. And you're talking about the skills that help people manage and live successfully, even under extraordinarily stressful circumstances.
Yeah, I think that's incredibly well put. Again, life goes on, and as much and all as we'd like to press the pause button on everything that we're feeling right now, we can't, and life just wouldn't work like that. So yes, I think, if you are in that situation and you feel that, this is becoming so hard, it's almost unbearable, there's a toolbox that I think exists for everybody. And sometimes it might be reading a book such as the one that you and Peter Nicholson have created. Other times it might be listening to your favorite podcast. It might be just simply going for a walk. There's a million things people can do to help lift their spirits and keep them, I suppose, in a place where they're moving forward. And I think that's so important. A sense of moving forward, of progression, is always important to see light at the end of the tunnel.
So one of the things that you would advise, and that you found successful for people, is to have a forward, to be forward-looking. And even if the steps they take are tiny, tiny, tiny ones, they're making some steps.
Yes, any progress is good progress. Sometimes it feels like you mightn't be achieving a whole lot, but if you can wake up tomorrow morning after having a bad night and maybe things were, very, very hard on you, and you can take one or two steps that, even just for your own self, your own mental health, makes life just that little bit easier, that will stand to you. And you can find then that maybe, today is a little bit better, not just for you, but for the people around you as well. So I think we're very hard sometimes in trying to set goals that maybe we aren't always able to achieve, and they're very lofty goals that at the moment in time is what we all want to happen. But maybe the small steps, those incremental bits and pieces that we can all do through, again, just reaching into ourselves and valuing ourselves, working, hard at achieving whatever it is we want to set out to achieve. It could be simple stuff. It could be just getting the dinner ready for the kids, an hour early to take the pressure off. Those are just examples that I can think of off the top of my head, but I've seen couples do it. And I've seen people come through these types of situations in the past stronger and better, and come out the other side as friends, in fact.
Yeah. I want to ask you, David, because of your background, your experience, your knowledge about working with couples, you mentioned that one of the things that's really important is that even though it seems absolutely obvious, but still very important, is keeping adult stuff away from, as you put it, tiny ears.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
I'm wondering if you could identify one, two, three, any number of specific techniques or tools that parents can use to be able to have adult to adult conversations, but not let it be part of what the children hear.
Yeah. So whenever I start off on a mediation, I think, that kind of interim period of time, you need a way to communicate, even if you're not fully, I suppose, aware of what you want to happen through mediation. One thing that I found worked really interestingly with one couple not so long ago was that they had a code, literally they had a signal to each other that if things were heading south, that they would leave the room. And it sounds crazy, but it worked, and they would flick the light switch on or off depending on where they were, and it just sent a message to the other person that I'm at that place now where I need to take a step out of here, and it worked. And that mightn't work for everybody, but it's just an example of, I suppose, one or two simple steps that could be taken to take the heat out of a situation. And again, I do say to couples, in terms of the conversation that you might be tempted to have while you're in mediation, again, I think everybody agrees with this, that the children unfortunately can get caught in the crossfire, and I think that sense of certainty, I think the sense of control coming back to a situation is hugely valuable for them. So you can have this kind of, I suppose, interim arrangement in place where one party can't speak about the other party, I suppose, in a negative way, while the kids are present in the room. And it sounds so obvious and so simple, but a lot of couples really struggle to do that sometimes. And it takes practice, it takes time. And again, I think overall, the benefits of it work out incredibly well for everybody. I do mean that. I've seen at the end of mediations where couples have successfully done that and found actually this has really worked. This has really gotten our family to the next phase of where we need to be. Whatever that looks like, it's up to them. But the kids, they're the focus of every mediation practically that I do. And I think every couple unites around that idea too.
Yeah, well, as a therapist, you're also aware, and I just want to come back to the parents for a second, that one of the difficulties for the parents, not just that they're in a confined space, not just that they are dealing with circumstances outside their control, but at the same time, they're dealing with the normal emotional responses to the end of a loving relationship, whether that's sadness, confusion, bitterness, despair, anger. We could list on and on and on. How do you suggest that parents in this kind of a confined situation be able to take care of themselves emotionally so that it doesn't explode into an argument that happens in front of the children?
Yeah, I think again, when you're in a situation where you're your own best and maybe worst ally in terms of that type of scenario, what you really need to do is look back at what's worked for you in the past. And again, that could, again, I sometimes feel I state the obvious, but if you found that, again, a particular activity just helps distract or take your mind off a particular problem, then do it. If you found that picking up the phone to your closest friend or somebody that you trust, then that is a huge thing to do for you as well. People find all sorts of ways of managing their emotions. One thing that I remember quite recently, a young man I worked with, he did a thing called angry writing. And literally what he did was he'd get a pen and paper and he would scroll on it everything bad that he was feeling or what he felt another person maybe might be putting him through. So much so that he'd break the pen, in fact. But did the release of that just really, really work for him? So there's a huge amount of information, particularly in this book, that demonstrates the kind of, I suppose, approaches people can take just to value themselves enough and protect themselves enough to allow those negative feelings out in some form. And again, I go back to what we said earlier, Michael, which is small progress is good progress. You won't achieve what you'd absolutely love to. That end goal mightn't be quite within your grasp. But if you can make your own life a little bit better, that will have a ripple effect, and that will help the whole family. And I think those little steps are so important.
Thank you for talking with me today, David, for your advice, for the way in which you offer optimism and realism at the same time. I think those are twins that we often don't see together. And I want to thank you. And on behalf of my colleague, Peter Nicholson, thank you again for contributing to the book.
Thank you. And thanks for allowing me part of this project. Thank you.